Well, this is the first edition of the KhoodeelaarTV channel being broadcast online by the Khoodeelaar campaign in association with a number of active constituent campaigns, including the recently formed End Hunger at Root, which is intended to address the poverty, hunger, destitution, starvation, displacement, migration caused by intentional policy and negligence on the part of corporations, on the part of the governments in the states concerned across Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world from where people in poverty, hunger, homelessness, destitution seek to find alternative places with opportunities to end hunger, poverty, destitution that they are experiencing. There are several 100 million people across the world today, even according to the otherwise less than efficient and less than committed bureaucracy of the United Nations organization. So it is more likely that the number of people in general poverty, low income, destitution, starvation, hunger, and famine, all of these, not one of these only, all of these would be around 1 billion or more. And if that is the case, then at least 600 to 700 million of them would be in Asia and Africa. And so our world exclusive original diagnosis of Fleet Street includes a long list of exclusives. And together, this channel and this broadcast and this project and this program represents the observations, the findings based on the research that our movement carries out every single day and has been carrying out for decades. By our movement, we refer to the movement for the defense of the community in the East End of London and the defense of the values, universal values from the movement based in the East End of London for the benefit of the whole world and the whole community of thinkers, active thinkers and thinkers who are active in any form, any substantial form to address, to deal with, to diffuse the poverty and hunger and destitution. And we originate these phrases. We know that there are across the world, especially Western Europe, in North America, and some other parts of the world, organizations that claim to be engaged in ending poverty, hunger, destitution, and all the rest of it. But we assert that ours is the only one that says all of it, all of the truth, and sets out every day all of the ways to begin to end hunger, poverty, destitution, and violations of basic international human rights. And on an intellectual level, we said, the latest time we said that was in yesterday's edition, our level of engagement intellectually transcends and supersedes and exceeds and surpasses and goes way, way beyond anything that has been achieved in the organized institutions, including the universities and comparable counterpart organizations across the Western Europe and North America and the rest of the world, wherever there can be any comparable institution. So it's beyond universities of universal level, beyond one university or beyond all the universities in terms of the values and the standards and the rigor and the universality of what we actually advocate and analyze and publish and share. So anyone who carries out any kind of formal research intended to obtain a stamp of scholarship, either a degree, postgraduate degree, or a doctorate degree, or a postdoctoral degree, or similar, and in any way makes any statement that resembles anything we have published or we are publishing or we do publish, will be asked or will be required to produce the source of their actual finding. Because what we broadcast may look kind of not formal because of the lack of dressage and the decorations. But actually, everything we produce, publish, assert is based on years of evidence, fact checking, investigating, probing. And we research and we investigate at our own cost, in our own time, with our own resources, whatever those are at the relevant times. Where we refer to any other source or sources, we make that explicit. And the fact that the Khoodeelaar television channel does carry out the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street speaks for itself, that we do recognize the existence of contents. And the contents include all of Fleet Street. We may not refer to everything, but we are referring to Fleet Street, all the papers published from London. Now, the Financial Times is the only one of the Fleet Street titles that actually prints outside of the UK as well as in London. For example, it has got printed in London, Liverpool, Glasgow, Dublin, Frankfurt, Milan, Madrid, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Seoul, and Dubai. Now, Dubai is the only part of the mainland Asia where it prints. Tokyo is an island, Hong Kong is an island, Singapore is an island, and soul is, of course, in an island. So it prints in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations in Asia, and it prints in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. That is 3 locations in the USA. And it publishes from London, Liverpool, Glasgow, Dublin, 4 locations in the UK, and 1 Frankfurt in Germany, Milan in Italy, and Madrid in Spain, 1 each. So the Financial Times is the only one that publishes the printed form as well from these cities, but it is part of Fleet Street as well. The others, and we shall do a check again, the others don't print from other locations except, well, the Guardian has to publish from or print from Manchester as well, for the simple reason that the Guardian is not originally the Guardian, it is originally the Manchester Guardian. So therefore, for that reason, the Guardian has to be printed from Manchester, just for its own sake. And we shall come to the others in a short while. Let's see the Guardian. All right, the Guardian is published from London, Manchester, and see if it has got any other locations. It has got details of the printing, where its main printing is done in Oldham and Glasgow. And of course, Deansgate in Manchester. But the Guardian is only published in limited places in this. Now, whether they are published, the Guardian publishes in the USA is not mentioned here as far as we can see. But the Guardian has got operations, online operations in the USA for certain. And it has got definitely activities in Germany and in France and in the continent of Australia. In Australia, Guardian Australia is in operation. So, but essentially, Fleet Street is about the London-based political establishment and the main kind of assumptions on which the Fleet Street narrative is based. The assumptions are similar to and correspond to or correspond with what is called Little Englander mentality. The Little Englander mentality is summed up in action in the behavior of the Brexiteers. And the Little Englanders are actually convinced that the whole world, the planet, Earth, and all the continents don't exist. That Little England is the center of the earth and the center of all the best kind of endeavors and achievements. That kind of sick mentality explains empire and why For 500 years, the Little Englanders thought that they were bigger than the rest of the world, and so they went around the world thinking that Africa was part of Little England, that the biggest continent was part of the Little England. And it is the Little England mentality that is festering now under the guise of the COVID betrayals and failures and lies. So when we say we carry out world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, Fleet Street is the tip of the iceberg of the sickness of lies and lying and denials and breaches and criminality of the mind, the criminality of the mindset of crimes that are considered not crimes but legitimate activities, looting other people's continents and other people's countries and resources, and then asserting that these belong to Little England. One of the severest criticisms made of the Brexiteers' agenda before the COVID hit the world was that the Brexiteers were committing one of history's worst self-harming activities committed by any group of people, identifiable group of people. And that was to do with the fact that Brexit, or the cry for Brexit, or the claim for Brexit, was based on, in their view, Little Englanders' view, the fact, which is absolutely fantasy, not fact, that the UK's membership of the European Union was causing most of the problems to the British society, to the British economy, and to the British spirit of invention, expansion, and all the other good things. And the warning was, the observation was, that these claims were based on a fantasy mindset, and that the people who were uttering those slogans or making those claims were doing damage to the positive structure of social kind of administration, work, service that had been created with the contributions of the UK's membership of the European Union and the UK's membership of an involvement in various international treaties and agreements and obligations that originally arose from the founding of the United Nations organizations in the 1940s. And the civilization or the civilizing of the UK's constitution, forms of government, accountability, etc., that occurred directly as a result of the UK's membership of and signatory status on the international treaties and declarations, especially those about human rights and accountability, transparency and equality and fairness. Those were direct results of UK's membership of international organizations and subscription to international descriptions and agreements and declarations. But the Little Englanders, primarily being ignorant, were also very dishonest. Ignorance, of course, is a big part of the reason why people tell lies. So the Brexiteers told lies. made up things. Made up things like Boris Johnson made up one quote or a number of quotes when he was a young reporter employed by the Daily Telegraph and based in Brussels. And he made up quotes. Johnson made up quotes that were absolutely made up, not true. For example, let's see what are accessible in the list. There are several lists of lies that Boris Johnson told, and Boris Johnson hasn't stopped lying. But let's see which ones are listed in the accessible form. While we are talking about Boris Johnson and lying, we have to say that all the frontline Brexiteers were over-promoted by Fleet Street. And by Fleet Street, in this instance, we particularly mean the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Daily Borisgraph, the Daily Star. The others, like the Times, the Daily Mirror, the Sunday People, the Observer, the Guardian, those, the I newspaper, the Independent, which is only online now, their lying were less obvious or less brazen, but they did lie as well. And they lied in various forms. They're students of ethics and mental illness combined would know, have various forms, various levels, various kind of identities, various expressions. Let's see what Boris Johnson's lies are accessible. So the entry has got 481 results in 59 seconds. And one of the people who wrote a year ago is Catherine Butler in The Guardian. Now, Catherine Butler's piece is headed this way: I was in Brussels when Johnson peddled his original Euro lies. Nobody's laughing now. So she says, returning to Brussels has reminded me of how officials failed to take his pernicious myth-making seriously. This was published on the Guardian website at 0800 hours GMT on Tuesday, the 10th of December, 2019. And it starts in the first paragraph, opening paragraph. It's a Reuters photograph taken by Hannah McKay. It's a picture of Banksy mural in Dover. And that is Europe, a pro-European mural. Now, the opening paragraph says, an artwork in the lobby of the Parlement, the European Commission headquarters in Brussels, has 12 gold stars in a circle on blue canvas, which is what the mural is about also. It is, the label says, a mixed media representation of the European flag dancing for joy. And this was written in December. So Thursday's election will, Boris Johnson hopes, resolve Britain's neuralgic Europe question, letting him take the UK out of the EU on 31st of January. The formal end of membership, if Johnson wins, should, after 46 years, feel seismic, one of those gold stars falling out of the constellation. But in the place where Johnson, as a Daily Telegraph correspondent in the early 1990s, did so much to debase the European Union's virtues, things have moved on. Britain has never been so obsessed with Europe, but the European Union has already left Britain. And she goes on in the next paragraph, third paragraph. I was in Brussels too in those years, reporting on, among other things, the birth of the European Union's most ambitious and possibly ill-conceived idea, the euro. And before our eyes, Johnson hatched the stories that seemingly incubated this ending and the shockwaves that will follow. The 2016 UK vote to leave was not entirely about Europe, but Brexit as a promise that British politicians are now expected to honor, even if it makes no sense, is in part the rejection of a mythical Europe that came to life in these buildings in the mid-1990s. With so many uncertainties about to be upturned, I returned to Brussels last month. If the curtain was really about to fall, I wanted to remind myself of how Johnson's revolution took hold. And she goes on and she goes on and she goes on. And there is a picture. I mean, she's going on a bit long-winded, but let's. And she is described as the Guardian's associate editor, Europe. What she is actually saying is that Boris Johnson made up quotes. I mean, she doesn't. It's a typical Guardian kind of lacking in rigor and lacking in straight talking. Let's see what she says. Well, it's another piece in the Guardian. It's misleading link because it's Max Hastings' piece, which is headed, I was Boris Johnson's boss. He is utterly unfit to be prime minister. Anyway, there are hundreds of pieces that say that Boris Johnson lied in Brussels, about Brussels, and in fact, the Brexit that he kind of fronted as a campaign at the last minute was a campaign against the mythical monstrosity of Brussels that he, Boris Johnson, had created by lying about it, lying about the Union in the 1990s. And so therefore, what we are doing, I mean, the diagnosis of Boris Johnson's lies is only a part of the hundreds, thousands of items that we include in our coverage and our investigation. The main thesis about Boris Johnson and Brexit and his disastrous, negligent, incompetent, unfit performance whilst he is still incumbent in that post. affect the whole social kind of fabric. And what the Fleet Street papers should be doing, if there were journals of record, should be reporting on the failures, but they're not doing that. So they are lying 30 years on, since Boris Johnson began lying about Brussels while he was posted in Brussels as the young reporter employed by the so-called Daily Telegraph at that time. Now, although the Fleet Street papers, like The Guardian, which claim to be detached from the kind of involvement, partisan involvement that the others are kind of exposed as being engaged in, like the Mail, the Sun, the Express, the Boris Graph, and even the Times. The Guardian is too pathetic in its kind of lack of rigor. And this is typical of the Guardian. Whatever the line, whatever the position, the Guardian doesn't tell it straight. And so therefore, when we say that we diagnose the liars of Fleet Street, we do include the Guardian, not because we want to call some publication or title or entity liars. We don't need to. The only reason why we call the Guardian another liar, a lying outfit constituting Fleet Street, is because the evidence justifies that. The evidence warrants our calling and objectively calling the Guardian another lying front in Fleet Street, from Fleet Street. Although it publishes from Manchester as well, but the Guardian is, like the Financial Times, part and parcel of Fleet Street. And it has been since it dropped the word Manchester from the title, the masthead, and became simply the Guardian. We shall cover relevant other parts of the Guardian today later. So there is this overdue update on the princess in Dubai, where her father has kept her prisoner, had her kind of kidnapped with the aid of Narendra Modi's Indian army, and had her confined in a prison, specially created to keep her imprisoned. The Princess Latifa, who is now described as 35 years old. Princess Latifa is one of 30 children known to be kind of fathered by this Dubai quote ruler, with at least 6 women. And it is not described as to the sequence of how many children were produced with how many women at what kind of intervals. But the latest number given is that he is the father of 30 children, and Latifa is one of those 30 children. Now, this piece in the Times today is headlined or headed, "Help to Free My Sister. Dubai Princess Begs British Police." Now, this one is called, in the caption, Princess Shamsa, above and left. They've got 2 pictures of her, was seized in Cambridge in 2000 after fleeing the estate near Chobham in Surrey, owned by their father Sheikh Mohammed. These are the pictures of this child. She is the sister of the other one, Latifa. This is Princess Shamsa. And What the Times piece says: the missing Dubai princess has appealed to British police to reinvestigate the fate of an older sister who disappeared in Cambridge 2 decades ago, according to a smuggled letter. So this is the second child of that ruler that was kidnapped or seized. Princess Latifa, 35, who says that she is being held captive by her family, said that police could help to free Princess Shamsa, 39. So Princess Shamsa is older than Princess Latifa. The older sister ran away in 2000 from a Sare estate owned by her father, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai. She was seized 2 months later. Cambridgeshire police investigated the case at the time but were blocked from pursuing it to the United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is. All I ask of you is to please give attention on her case, because it could get her freedom. Her freedom. Latifa, 35, wrote in the letter which has been shared with the BBC. Your help and attention on her case could free her. She has strong links to England. She really loves England. All of her fondest memories are of her time there. Details of what happened to Shamsa, who was staying at the Long Cross estate near Chobham when she fled, were only fully revealed when Latifa, who is her full sister by one of Sheikh Mohammed's 6 wives, ran away herself in 2018. There is the reference to the 30 children and the 6 wives. The full sister, that means that both of them have the same mother and the same father. Details of what happened to Shamsa, who was staying at Long Cross estate near Chobham when she fled, were only fully revealed when Latifa, who is her full sister by one of Sheikh Mohammed's 6 wives, ran away herself in 2018. In a video recorded and sent to the campaign group detained in Dubai to be released only if she were recaptured, she described how Shamsa had been held in prison and then drugged to keep her docile after her escape attempt. Latifa said she herself had tried to escape before. This time she almost made it to India on a yacht owned by a Frenchman, Hrs Jobart, along with a Finnish friend, Tina Jouhianian. But they were intercepted by the Indian and Emirate navies. Last week, BBC Panorama updated the story by releasing more videos, this time secretly recorded in 2019 by Latifa on a phone smuggled into the villa in Dubai, where she said she was being held captive. Now, no need to read the rest of it, because this is our diagnosis. Dominic Raab, the current foreign secretary in the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal, is a criminal liar. We say it on the record. The criminal liar was reported yesterday as having reached his 46th year or 47th year by the Times. Quite why the Times thinks that printing the date of birth of this liar is of any significance whatsoever, except to say that this liar, Rob, is an Oxbridge kind of graduate. He went to Cambridge. Just to dispel the myth, if going to Cambridge or being, quote, given a degree or certificate by Cambridge or Oxford means that they have got any moral, ethical legitimacy, then Dominic Raab cannot say he went to Cambridge at all, because his behavior, and he is a sinister, racist, anti-Muslim, self-serving, ignorant Brexiteer who didn't even know where Dover was or which way Dover was facing or something like that. We can check on the exact evidence as published and as publicly accessible about Dominic Raab's stupidity. Look up the word stupidity. We are not using it because we have no other word to describe him. This Dominic criminal Raab has referred to the Uyghur Muslims in China. He has referred to this several times in the last few months. And this criminal, anti-Muslim, liar never has any respect for the Muslim community, people whose faith is Islamic, not because of any particular involvement in any ideological, radical activities. Muslim as a faith, that's how we refer to Islam, and that's why we defend the victims of anti-Muslim hatred, genocide, murders, massacres, and attacks in context. We don't do that because of any special favor or special kind of interest in defending anything that is illegal, unlawful, criminal, done in the name of Islam. So we are far from any of those categories or any of those groups or interests or platforms. What Dominic Raab's crime is that for decades, well, since long before he was born, he's only 46 or 47, so he's only 4 decades plus old. And his adult life began only, let's say, 3 decades or thereabouts ago. Dominic Raab has known all his life, or all his adult life, or all his political careerist life, about the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims and other groups of people in China. But he has not ever made any case against those persecutions and for the rights of the persecuted. The only time he has found that persecution of interest to him or importance to him is when the UK, under the influence of the USA, changed course and adopted a policy of hostility to China. We are not in any way connected with or sympathetic to the Chinese government regime or its agencies in any shape or form. But the fact that the Chinese regime has become the target of Dominic Raab's criticism because of, as Raab says in a kind of dismissive, offensive, footnote kind of way, because of the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims, is adding contempt to his hatred that pre-existed his beginning of these references to China as the persecutors of the Uyghur Muslims. Raab is the foreign secretary, just as Boris Johnson was foreign secretary when Aung San Suu Kyi led the regime that carried out the genocide and the massacres of the Rohingyas because they were Muslims. And Johnson to this day has not uttered one single sentence that constitutes a substantial recognition of what happened in Burma and to the Muslims and to the Rohingyas, let alone to any overdue repudiation of the crimes against humanity that Aung San Suu Kyi or Suu Kyi, there are two pronunciations, take whichever one you think is appropriate in your way. Aung San Suu Kyi or Aung San Suu Kyi led the regime that carried out the massacres and the genocide and the rapes and the murders of the children and the women. And after this series of brutalities and crimes against humanity became widely known in the rest of the world, especially Western Europe and the North American kind of countries, Aung San Suu Kyi or Aung San Suu Kyi continued to defend the regime. Remember what we're saying. It's like Hitler being given platform after the end of the Western European World War and defending the Nazis and the Nazis' crimes at the Nuremberg trial. So this criminal against humanity, Aung San Suu Kyi, is not being criticized by Dominic Raab, the sequential successor in post to the anti-Muslim hate preacher Boris Johnson. Dominic Raab has actually condemned those who are attacking Aung San Suu Kyi. He has given her added rehabilitation by using the pretext of the so-called coup that has happened in Burma in the last month. So the agenda, the narrative, the kind of purpose of the criminal against humanity, Aung San Suu Kyi, is being announced by Dominic Raab by painting Aung San Suu Kyi as the victim of a coup. Whereas he is absolutely silent about her victims, the victims of the genocide that she headed. The genocide was committed while Aung San Suu Kyi was the head of the regime that carried out the genocide. And the fact that the genocide did take place is not in doubt in any shape or form. Even the lukewarm, timid, and morally kind of repugnantly lazy bureaucracy of the United Nations itself has had to confess to finding evidence that genocide and massacre and mass murders did take place against the Rohingyas because they were Muslims. And to this day, Raab has not condemned that. Raab has not condemned in any shape or form, except to mouth ritualistic utterances like Alok Sharma. Alok Sharma was the minister in the Foreign Secretary's office department at the time. And Alok Sharma, who is now Secretary of State for Business, etc., made a series of pretense kind of excuses and pretended to be sympathetic to the victims of the anti-Rohingya genocidal attacks by the Burmese. Sharma was the one that was sent by Boris Johnson to appear during questions about Burma and the Burmese persecution of the Rohingyas. Johnson never stood to answer the questions that a foreign secretary, the foreign secretary of the time, should have answered. So we shall be talking more and more about this and other aspects of the behavior of Dominic Raab and the British government of liars that have been complicit with the violations of human rights of Muslims, the violations being done by Muslims, like this ruler of Dubai, this criminal, Sheikh Mohammed, whatever. This criminal is being excused accountability because he has lots of money in Dubai and he is paying lots and lots of journalists, Western kind of celebrities, and other prostitutes disguised as business person and socialites and so on. And today's news includes, generally the news, not necessarily originated by Fleet Street, but a news released from America about Joe Biden having spoken recently in the last 24 hours, probably, with the token king of Saudi Arabia. And the token king, I'm using the word token king, the phrase token king, because the main person who has been found to have been the main criminal behind the murder of Khashoggi, the Washington Post writer and the Saudi himself, who was murdered in Turkey, in the Saudi embassy in Turkey. And the king, Joe Biden has spoken to the king ahead of the scheduled release of an American FBI or Secret Service intelligence report into the murder of Khashoggi, the journalist. And according to the reports, the main person responsible for the murder is Prince Salman, whatever. And this is the very significant kind of change from the tone and the kind of policy that Donald Trump had adopted, because Trump actually suppressed all the kind of evidence and refused to take any action against the murderer of the journalist. So you can see the difference. Joe Biden may not be the ideal alternative to the Trump occupation of the White House, but at least, even if the report is only released and no action is taken, it will confirm all the evidence that has been found by both the Turkish kind of government and the Turkish journalists and by other investigators, that the murder of the journalist was carried out on the orders of Prince Salman, whatever. There are millions of entries to that name, so it can be checked online and otherwise. And Dominic Raab and Boris Johnson have stayed silent about Salman's crime. And they're still silent. So this plea by Latifa for her elder sister, Shamsa, is very significant. Because if a similar thing had been done by a country, even by a Muslim head of state or government in another Muslim country, and the Muslim country didn't have the kind of money that Dubai has, the response, the action by the Americans, by the French, and by the British would have been very, very different indeed. They would have declared a war on that country or that state. The evidence is there. They murdered Saddam Hussein, they murdered Muammar Gaddafi. Both of them were not, they were Muslims, but they were not in any way, shape, or form radicals They were against radical Muslims in their countries, in their times, both of them, both Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. But they murdered them. I mean, is it possible to even think a similar action against anyone committing crimes in Dubai, against other Muslims, let alone in Saudi Arabia against journalists like Khashoggi? Now, Khashoggi is a name that is well known in the English kind of circles because of Suraya Khashoggi. Suraya Khashoggi was married to the Saudi traditional arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. Now, Suraya Khashoggi was an ordinary English girl from probably Leicestershire, but she was attractive and she somehow met Adnan Khashoggi, who married her. And this Khashoggi probably is a relative to the Adnan Khashoggi, or maybe a member of the same family. But the Khashoggi name is well known in this country, at least in Fleet Street. Now, the Times piece about Princess Latifa and Princess Shamsa refers to Dominic Raab as saying that the video footage shown on BBC Panorama last week was deeply troubling and that Britain would watch very closely developments on that front. What an outrageous, criminally stupid and offensive statement. What does he mean? He's the foreign secretary, for heaven's sake. What does he mean by watching developments on front? Whose development? Who is going to do the developing? He should be saying to this Dubai ruler, criminal, to release these two girls and let them go to wherever they think they need to go. Dominic Raab should not only be sacked, but should be prosecuted for crime of negligence of his duties to these two girls, two women now, 39 and 35. And there is no outcry in any part of Fleet Street about this. They are just kind of going through the motion and they are just passing notes. They are not saying on the front page, lead, splash. They are not saying that free the princesses. Let them travel wherever they want to go. And this is the sickness and the crime of Fleet Street. This is what this kind of discussion of the evidence, today's evidence we are talking about, and adding the contextual background, notes and factual notes for clarity and understanding. So nobody is going to say that. This is why it's world exclusive diagnosis. Diagnosis, you only diagnose something that is sick. And Fleet Street is sick of untruthfulness and lying. And as Einstein, the scientist, said, you cannot solve the problems of the world. There are too many problems in the world. But it is a worse offense to stay idle and not do anything. You have to do something to change the world and to end the wrongs and the bad things. That you have no option to not do anything. That's what Einstein said, and that's what motivates all the campaigns, all the campaigners, because everything that a genuine campaign is against the society, the goodness and the well-being and welfare and the rights and the safety of ordinary people. That is what a campaign means. The campaign is to protect the people's rights. Campaign is not a business. It cannot be a business. A business is complicity with the status quo. So the campaign has to go above the status quo, beyond the status quo, against the status quo. That's why the campaign requires, every time a genuine campaign requires something way in addition to what ordinary activities and ordinary engagements require and demand. A campaign, by definition, in that sense, is an act of prayer, let's say, to make it kind of clear. In short, doing good without any profit in return, any benefit in return for the doer is an act of prayer, universally. That is the definition. In simple terms, that is. So, for example, when the government, UK government, at that time, the Prime Minister was, of course, Tony Blair, capitulated to and colluded with the big business contractors and commissioned the Crossrail project. They did that by disregarding the impact on the people in the areas affected by the line. And the Khoodeelaar campaign came into existence in December 2003 when I and K. Jordan agreed during a short walk from Brick Lane to Liverpool Street, where I saw her off at a bus stop to her house in North London, and to stop the proposed hole to be dug in the middle of Brick Lane. Now, there was never going to be any business. That is to say, there was not going to be a return in terms of profit by doing anything about that project on the part of myself or K. Jordan or anybody else. Because the project was a government project. And even at that stage, it was worth 10, 11 billion pounds. And eventually, after 6-7 years of campaigning, we forced the plan to be redrawn. Now, anyone who knows about engineering, heavy engineering like tunneling and railway tunneling underground and all the rest of it in London, would know that it is absolutely formidable. So far, it has cost 18 to 20 billion pounds. But our campaign added 1 billion pounds of extra cost that they had to incur, because we forced them to redraw the whole line from Edgware Road, West London, up to Stratford, let's say, and including the alignment, that is the line, the placing of the line, the location of the line, the redoing of the line. And this cost them, senior experienced drafts people, engineering drafts people would know, this cost them easily at least 1 billion pounds to redo the thing. We did that. We caused them to do that. Now, we had not got even £1 million to spend in terms of cash. But we had the dedication and the truth on our side. So 6-7 years of my life went into stopping the government, digging the hole in Brick Lane and destroying the whole of the East End of London. And there is one example of telling the truth and defeating the lies. That is the campaign. You cannot buy that. If you hired any number of licensed law traders, you could have paid them millions of pounds, which is what has happened and what has been happening with the HS2 campaign, stopping HS2 campaign. They haven't stopped it, but the opponents of HS2 are doing that. They have spent altogether, they have spent a large number of kind of persons and councils, local councils opposing HS2 have spent many millions of pounds in fees that they have paid to licensed law traders just to be on the record, just to be appearing in various court hearings, staged or arranged against HS2. They did not get the money because they guaranteed a victory or a win against the HS2. They got the money because they are licensed to trade as barristers and as solicitors. And there is no guarantee of outcome, but there is absolute guarantee of payment. So they got paid millions. As David Pennick charged £20,000 for representing the Manchester City Football Club, not the Manchester United, but Manchester City Football Club, over a ruling of a European Football Regulating Authority. David Pennick charged Manchester City £20,000 per day. He didn't charge it by saying he would get a win, but he had to be paid just to be on the record. Now, if I charged anyone anything for doing the Khoodeelaar campaign and stopping the government from digging the hole in Brick Lane and in East End of London, I would have to be charging whoever more than £100,000 a day because of the outcome that I guaranteed. Every day I did something was a guaranteed event. The outcome was absolutely guaranteed because I opposed licensed law traders hired by the government. I opposed MPs sucking up to the government. And I, of course, oppose the mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, lying still Livingstone. And I opposed Tony Blair. I opposed the Department for Transport. So a campaign cannot be based on the guarantee of payment at all, because if payment is the first thing or the necessary thing, then no campaign can be done, because nobody in the community has the money, and it is the community that is being campaigned in defense of. So it's a highly significant difference between campaigning and between doing the professional job. No campaign can be like a professional job, because there would be no payment. There would not be any professional remuneration, reward. So the campaigning cannot be compared with the profession. it is way above the value and the quality any campaign, any professional can bring. The professional cannot protect the community. The professional cannot do the justice to the cause. The professional measures their time and their input, the pages of paper. If we did that about any campaign, and if we only campaigned based on being paid for the campaign, we would be in receipt of hundreds of millions of pounds every single campaign, because we've been doing major campaigns quite apart from the Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail. Ongoing, every day we are campaigning. This series of publication called Khoodeelaar, and we shall come to updating on the definition of what Khoodeelaar means outside of the direct confrontation with the government over the Crossrail hole. We have been doing original campaigns on education, on health, and access to the judicial process and the legal process. If we did any of that by requiring payments, we would not be able to do the campaign, because nobody that we have been defending has the financial capacity to pay for any of it. But even if they had any capacity, we could not do the campaign by expecting them to part with their money. Real life people, ordinary people in communities, do not think that they have any duty to spend any of their money or their time or energy to defend what will actually affect their own lives in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term. So doing campaign for other people is always based on being out of this world. Because if you thought worldly wise, like the material kind of return and equation, you could not do any moral activities, because you will be disappointed, and it will be a deterrence against your continuing any activity seeking justice for the people. And the people will never face to face or in real terms express any actual recognition of the value and the quality of the benefits that your campaign has brought to them. So the second thing is not to expect any gratitude. This is not an easy thing. Human beings are emotional creatures as well. Every campaigner is emotional as well. In fact, more emotional than the average person. But that emotional characteristic has to be restrained and controlled and disciplined. Otherwise, the campaign would be completely lost. Lost in the sense that it will not be happening. Not lost in the sense of being defeated, but it will not be even happening. All the tales, all the accounts, all the reports, historically and contemporaneously, and contemporary kind of evidence suggest that to succeed, every campaign has to be totally immaterial, in the sense that selfless. It cannot be a career move, doing a campaign. In fact, the third and fourth consequence for the campaigner is that the campaigner has to pay the price, because the campaigned against will turn on the campaigner, not on the people they are campaigning for, but on the campaigner. and try to find weakness in the campaigner's personality, in the campaigner's tactics, in the campaigner's kind of brief or claims, and try to kind of damn them, to undermine them, to make them come across as being somehow faulty, flawed, immoral, selfish, and anything else. So campaigning is the next thing, if you like, to being otherworldly and, in religious terms, like a saint. You have to be a saint to be a true campaigner for just cause and causes. So Dominic Raab has not solidarized with the campaign to free these two women. And Dominic Raab is not alone as an occupant in a state office who is failing the duty of care, the moral duty to uphold the rights of persecuted individuals or groups of individuals in persecution. When the Burmese regime carried out the massacre of the Muslim Rohingyas in late 2016 and 2017, the Western media, that is very much inclusive of the Fleet Street papers, failed to report. It was a delayed report and a reluctant report of acknowledgement of what has happened. But it was never spontaneous, and it has never been spontaneous recognition of the rights of the victims of the genocide, the Burmese genocide of the Rohingyas. It was like a lot of the conservatives in the early 1990s, when the Bosnian Muslims and the other Muslims in then Yugoslav kind of regime or regions were being massacred. The Western governments, including the government in the USA fronted by Bill Clinton, were reluctant to come to the aid of the victims of the genocide. And the conservative Malcolm Rifkind, who was a spokesperson for the conservatives, either he was a foreign secretary, I think he was foreign secretary, he refused to commit the UK government to any program of rescuing the Muslims who were victims of the genocide by the Serbs. The Serbians were carrying out genocide of the Muslims in Serbia and in the neighboring countries. So Malcolm Rifkind repeatedly refused to commit the UK to a program of rescuing the victims of the genocide by the Serbians. And Bill Clinton did the same. And it was already too late. They didn't take the action to save these people from the genocide that was ongoing, but they allowed the substantial numbers of the victims to be murdered, massacred, before they took the action. So when I say Dominic Raab is a racist, criminal, liar, I don't say he is the only one. So whenever Dominic Raab or someone in his post or his position makes any utterance about human rights and civilization, rule of law, and all the rest of it, those utterances must be seen in context of the record of the behavior over a series of genocides. When they say Holocaust is not a Jewish word. Holocaust is a German word. And it's the worst form, let's say, of the kind of organized massacres of people. They don't, in the context of the vocabulary of their narrative and their kind of commentary, they don't include Muslims as being victims of Holocaust. They don't include the people of the original nations that are now occupied by the Western European kind of nations in North America, and the same in South America as well. Because the people, the original nations that lived in what is Brazil, Argentina, and the rest of the South American, Latin American countries, which are controlled by Western European white people controlling the governments, the main businesses, those people were Holocausted as well. And the fact that there is no reference to that shows the abuse of terms and the language and the process of brainwashing. And all of this is being done today and has been done for hundreds of years, for at least 200 years since newspapers began publishing in Fleet Street or published from Fleet Street. And they have been in denial of the Holocaust and massacres and genocides and genocide victims, who are not just one nation, not just one particular ethnicity or racial group, but many. And Fleet Street is not only denying those, but denying the whole picture of genocide-based culture. We talked previously about the ghettos. The only ghettos that are remembered with respect are the ones that were in Warsaw, in Poland. And those were part of the targets of the Nazis' attacks on the Jewish people. And the Jewish ghettos were the ones that are given any substantial recognition in the language, in the vocabulary, active to this day. And I contrasted the use of the word ghetto by referring to a former councillor on Town Council. I won't repeat the full details again, except to say that there is a brainwashing. Brainwashing takes place on several levels. One is subliminal and one is direct. The subliminal one is more kind of, it lasts longer and it penetrates deeply into the psychosis, into the mentality and mind of the person being brainwashed. And this counselor, Bangladeshi counselor, ex-counselor, who is one of the people whose only claim to doing any campaigning is to refer to their photograph being taken or printed in a newspaper at the time or shortly after Al-Tabali was murdered by racists. That was in 1978. Now, this is what? 31, 41, 42, 43 years later. And they haven't done anything against racism in that time. And they keep saying that they were in the demonstration against the murder of Al-Tabali. Think about that. A campaign cannot be one photo shoot. A campaign cannot be standing in a gathering during a protest or something while a picture or pictures is or are taken of that and then saying that that was campaigning. It's not. A campaigning is to secure action, whatever the action is. And without that action, if you take part in a campaign, you only support a campaign maybe in principle, but you are not doing the campaign. You have to be committed to doing serial things, uncounted numbers of things every day. And so this ex-councillor now said to me that Brick Lane community was a ghetto. Now this ex-councillor is never going to be a councillor again. And if he is, then he is not going to be worth even mentioning. Because the only reason why he was a councillor in Brick Lane or in the Brick Lane area was because there were significant numbers of people on the electoral register who were Bangladeshis. Significant numbers of white people or non-Bangladeshis would never vote for him. Well, that's simple as that. In Tower Hamlets, there are significant numbers of people, even now, because there has been a reduction since 1970s, because people have moved away from the area. But there is enough numbers of Bangladeshis on the electoral register, whom these Bangladeshi candidates routinely and rigorously and most intensely lobby and approach for their votes. So it's not a ghetto in a negative sense. It's a resource, it's a positive kind of identity of a community. So much so that most of these morons who become Bangladeshi councillors are either subliterate or illiterate or uneducated or ill-educated or stupid or completely lacking in basic understanding of even the East End of London as a society. The only reason why these morons and liars ever get elected is by approaching these people in Siloti language and making them all kinds of promises and whatever, and getting their votes on the day and then forgetting them during the years that follow until the next election and until the next rituals they perform. So this ex-Bangladeshi councillor behaved as a complete typical idiot. Never in his entire life would he become a councillor without these ghetto people, as he contemptibly referred to them. These votes are like gold. He would not get a job even in Liverpool Street, in Bishopsgate. And yet he had the platform as a councillor, elected councillor. And this ingrate, ungrateful moron is typical. Most of the Bangladeshi councillors have been betraying their commitment to the community. We shall be talking more at length about the betrayal and the stupidity in due course. Now, this is coming to 12 minutes past 12 GMT and also currently the UK local time. On Friday, the 26th of February, 2021. We shall be continuing later. What happens is that every time we do this broadcast, we then have to process it and post it in the places that we currently use, and then diagnose the contents, and then come back to the next one after doing all these processes. An update here on the diagnostic and the disclaimer update here about the legal status. First of all, anyone watching this and using this for any business or profitable purposes or for academic purposes must remember that this is all copyright. Not only does it say that, but even if it doesn't say it, it's still covered by copyright claims and rights. So they must acknowledge expressly whatever they are using. They must not steal, because it is not produced for abuse and theft and immoral purposes. They must acknowledge this in full and expressly. And if there is any query about the accuracy of any of our assertions, statements, analysis, they can directly send a message by Twitter. And you can use the search engine and you can find Twitter account Khoodeelaar. Send a direct message asking any legitimate question. No answer can be guaranteed in terms of time. An answer will be given as and when available. Time permits and resource permit, but we shall deal with any query about accuracy or further details or references. And this is the Khoodeelaar campaigns program, broadcast in association with a number of other campaigns, including the recent one that we have added to the movement defending the community in the East End of London, which is End Hunger at Root. We shall be updating our commentary on End Hunger at Root with a look back at my television broadcast on Channel 4 news slot in January 1992. So this is the ending of the program, part A of the Khoodeelaar TV channel, broadcast online only. And we shall be broadcasting part B when possible. As I said, after doing the necessary processing of this part.